It was a cold, moonless night, and Jake Stevens, a trucker for the past 2 years, found himself driving down a desolate highway in the middle of nowhere. His GPS had gone haywire hours ago, and he couldn't find a single soul on the road to ask for directions. The only landmark he could make out was a faded sign by the roadside that read, Mile Marker 13. Jake had heard stories about this stretch of road from other truckers at truck stops, but he had always brushed them off as just tales meant to scare rookies. They spoke of strange occurrences, trucks breaking down mysteriously, drivers disappearing, and eerie lights floating over the road at night. But Jake was not the superstitious type, and he pushed those thoughts out of his mind as he drove on. Suddenly, his truck's engine sputtered. He cursed under his breath as the truck came to a slow halt. Jake turned the key in the ignition, but the engine wouldn't start. Frustrated, he grabbed his flashlight and climbed out of the cab. As he opened the hood to check the engine, a gust of wind howled through the night, and Jake shivered. The temperature seemed to drop several degrees in a matter of seconds. Just then, Jake noticed something strange. A mist had begun to gather around the truck, thick and cold, rising up from the ground. He could barely see more than a few feet in front of him. Suddenly, he heard it. A faint whispering, like 100 voices murmuring just out of earshot. Jake's heart pounded in his chest as he shined his flashlight into the mist, but it was too thick to see anything clearly. He climbed back into the cab, locking the doors behind him, and fumbled for his phone. No signal. The whispering grew louder, more insistent, like it was trying to say something he couldn't quite make out. Jake turned the radio dial, hoping to find a station, any station. But all he got was static. And then, through the fogged-up windshield, he saw her, a figure standing in the middle of the road, barely visible through the mist. She was wearing a long white dress, and her hair hung down over her face. She was just standing there, motionless, as if she had been waiting for him. Jake's blood ran cold. He honked the horn, hoping to scare her away, but she didn't move. Instead, she raised her head, and even through the mist, Jake could see her eyes. They were hollow, dark pits, staring straight at him. Jake felt a chill run down his spine as he realized he wasn't looking at a living person. Suddenly, the truck's lights flickered, and the radio crackled to life. Amidst the static, a voice emerged, distorted but clear. It was the voice of a woman, and she was laughing. The sound was high-pitched, almost hysterical, and it sent shivers down Jake's spine. The laughter stopped abruptly, and the voice spoke again, this time in a whisper that cut through the static. "Come with me," it said. "Come with me. To the other side." Jake's instincts kicked in. He turned the key in the ignition again, and to his surprise, the engine roared to life. He hit the gas pedal, and the truck lurched forward, tires screeching against the asphalt. As he sped away, he glanced in the rearview mirror, but the figure in white was gone. The mist was lifting, and the night was becoming clear once more. Breathing a sigh of relief, Jake thought he had escaped whatever was haunting mile marker 13. But as he drove on, he noticed something strange. His reflection in the mirror wasn't his own. It was the face of the woman in white, her hollow eyes staring back at him, a smile playing on her lips. Jake screamed, and the truck swerved off the road. The last thing he heard was the sound of the woman's laughter echoing in his ears as the truck tumbled down the embankment into darkness. The next morning, a highway patrol officer found Jake's truck, overturned and empty, by mile marker 13. There was no sign of Jake, just the faint sound of static coming from the truck's radio. And if you listened closely, amidst the static, you could still hear the woman's laughter echoing through the air. Jake Stevens was never seen again, but truckers passing by mile marker 13 still report seeing a figure in white standing by the road, her hollow eyes watching them as they drive past, and the sound of faint, haunting laughter in the wind. It was mid-August, and the night had settled heavily over the deserted stretch of Highway 30, a solitary ribbon of asphalt cutting through the dark heart of rural Pennsylvania. Dave had been on the road for almost 12 hours, having started his shift from southern New Jersey and heading toward Lafayette, Indiana. With just a few hours left to go, the fatigue was beginning to claw at him, and his reliance on energy drinks was becoming a crutch. Desperate for a caffeine fix, Dave spotted a dimly lit gas station in the distance. The station was old and looked like it had been there for decades, its neon sign flickering intermittently. Relieved, he pulled in and parked the semi, hoping to grab a quick recharge and get back on the road. Inside, the gas station was eerily quiet. The floor tiles were worn, and the shelves were sparsely stocked. Behind the counter stood a middle-aged man with disheveled hair and a stained red t-shirt. His face was obscured by the shadows, and he was engrossed in a tattered magazine, barely acknowledging Dave's presence. Dave grabbed a handful of energy drinks and a bag of chips and brought them to the counter. The cashier's eyes flicked up momentarily, revealing a vacant, almost hypnotic gaze. "How much?" Dave asked, trying to break the uncomfortable silence. The cashier mumbled a sum, still not meeting his gaze. Dave paid quickly, eager to leave. As he walked back to his truck, he noticed something strange outside. A crowd of people stood just beyond the gas station's parking lot. They were dressed in old-fashioned clothing, breeches, top hats, and bonnets, like characters from a period drama. The figures stood motionless, their heads slightly tilted as if listening to something invisible. It struck Dave as bizarre, but he was too tired to dwell on it. He climbed back into his truck, hoping to make it through the remaining hours without incident. As he started the engine and reversed out of the lot, he glanced in his rearview mirror. The crowd remained, their eyes fixed on him with an unsettling intensity. Their faces were expressionless, yet their gaze felt penetrating, almost accusatory. Heart pounding, Dave drove on, glancing over his shoulder every few minutes. The figures seemed to linger at the edge of the gas station's lights, their outlines becoming fainter as he distanced himself. The road stretched endlessly ahead, but Dave couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. His grip on the steering wheel tightened, and his knuckles turned white. As he neared his destination, a chill settled in his bones. The rest of the drive had been uneventful, but the memory of those ghostly figures haunted him. When he finally arrived in Lafayette, he recounted the strange encounter to his colleagues. Their faces went pale as they listened, their reactions a mix of disbelief and concern. They had no explanations for the mysterious crowd or the gas station's odd atmosphere. The next morning, Dave decided to return to the gas station, hoping to find some logical explanation. As he approached the location, he found nothing but an empty lot. The gas station was gone, replaced by overgrown weeds and dilapidated structures that didn't match the memory of what he had seen. The signs, the building, even the cashier, they were all gone, as if they had never existed. Dave could only wonder if he had stumbled upon a ghostly anomaly, a relic of the past that had briefly intersected with his reality. The unease from that night lingered, a chilling reminder that sometimes the roads we travel are more than just paths. They are portals to the unknown. The Mojave Desert lay silent beneath a darkened sky, the kind of night where the horizon seemed to stretch on forever, and every shadow held a secret. Jake had been a trucker for over a decade, accustomed to the solitude of the open road. But on this particular night in 2017, the desolation felt heavier, more oppressive. His headlights flickered weakly, casting eerie, wavering beams across the empty highway. The darkness outside seemed to consume everything. Jake had been driving through the desert for hours, and the monotony was beginning to wear on him. He was delivering appliances from California to Arizona, but all he could think about was the money he needed and how his worn-out headlights made the road seem endless. Despite the fatigue gnawing at him, he pushed forward, reasoning that the straight stretch of highway made the risk bearable. It was about an hour before dawn when he noticed something strange in the distance, a faint glow that seemed to cut through the darkness. As he drew closer, he realized it was a car, its hazard lights flashing intermittently. Jake slammed on the brakes, his semi skidding to a stop just inches from the vehicle. It was a red Ford Fusion, eerily positioned in the middle of the road, its passenger door wide open. Jake's curiosity outweighed his caution. He shifted into reverse and parked beside the car, his mind racing with possibilities. Maybe someone needed help. Maybe the car had broken down. He decided to investigate, despite an unsettling feeling gnawing at him. He approached the car cautiously. The air was still, almost too still, and an unsettling silence pervaded the desert night. The only sound was the rhythmic clicking of the hazard lights. Jake's breath formed faint clouds in the cool desert air as he walked around the car, peering inside. The interior was empty, the back seat clear of any passengers or belongings. It was as if the car had been abandoned in a hurry. Jake's unease grew. He glanced around, feeling a creeping sensation that someone, or something, was watching him. Ignoring his instincts, he moved towards the trunk, which was locked. Using the car key he had found in the ignition, he unlocked it and attempted to open the trunk. It resisted, jammed from the inside. With some effort, he pushed through the back seat and managed to force it open. The trunk revealed 3 bulging garbage bags and a rope that had been used to secure it. Jake hesitated, glancing over his shoulder again, his heart pounding. He reached for the bags, only to be startled by a deafening gunshot that shattered the silence. Instinctively, he ducked and scrambled away, slamming his head on the roof of the car in his panic. He threw the keys inside and bolted back to his truck. As he climbed into the cab, he heard a voice shouting in the distance, growing closer by the second. It was a grungy, desperate voice calling out, "Hey!" repeatedly. Jake's fear escalated as he saw a figure emerging from the darkness. A short, burly man with red hair and worn overalls stood at the trunk, holding a rusty hunting rifle. The man's expression was a mixture of anger and worry. Jake gunned the engine, his semi lurching forward as the man started waving frantically. He glanced in the rearview mirror to see the man running after him, his frantic shouts fading as Jake sped away. The adrenaline surged through him as he pushed the truck beyond its limits. For a few moments, it seemed he might escape, but then he saw headlights approaching rapidly from behind. The car was closing in, honking aggressively. Panic gripped Jake as he realized the pursuing vehicle was trying to force him off the road. He dialed 911, his voice trembling as he recounted the events. The car's driver seemed intent on a confrontation, cutting in front of him and slamming on the brakes. Just as Jake prepared for a collision, police lights flickered ahead. The car veered off into the desert, disappearing into the vast darkness. Jake pulled over, his hands shaking as he explained the situation to the arriving officer. The cop, seemingly indifferent, took his report but did not pursue the suspect. Jake was left with a sense of helplessness, his encounter with the mysterious man and his abandoned car unresolved. To this day, Jake can't shake the memory of that night. He never found out what was in those bags or why the man had been so desperate. Every time he drives through the desert at night, the memory lingers, a haunting reminder of the shadows that lurk in the desolate places, waiting to swallow secrets, and maybe even a man.